But if I was to ask you about Yusuf alayhi salam, we all know the story of Yusuf alayhi salam, and we all know where Yusuf alayhi salam ended up. He ended up on the throne. He ended up not just as a noble prophet, but as an example of forgiveness, as an example of grace, as an example of perseverance. Immortalized in the Quran as this prophet from Bani Israel that is not immortalized because of his da'wah, but is immortalized because of his example in the face of his own tribulation. And da'wah, of course, emanated from that. I want you to imagine if you were having a conversation with Yusuf alayhi salam before Yusuf alayhi salam was thrown into the well. And the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, there is no lineage more noble than the lineage of Yusuf alayhi salam. A prophet, the son of a prophet, the son of a prophet, the son of a prophet. He is Yusuf ibn Yaqub, ibn Ishaq, ibn Ibrahim. When you talk about someone that's destined for greatness, Joseph, the son of Jacob, the son of Isaac, the son of Abraham. Talk about a legendary lineage. Talk about destined for greatness. Talk about having it all, quote unquote, handed to you as far as the spiritual hall of fame is concerned. You are the example of all of those examples that came before you. It culminates in you. Think about the pressure on Yusuf alayhi salam and imagine what you would have thought his trajectory would have been if you met him before he was thrown into the well. Like you all are familiar with LeBron and Bronny, right? As far as basketball analogies are concerned. The pressure on being the son of LeBron James and having to try to live up to that. And you're never going to be great enough, nor will you be bad enough. You're always kind of stuck in between. Or you're the brother of Steph Curry, you're Seth Curry. I feel bad for the guy. You are always in the shadow of someone greater than you. You either take what has been gained and become greater, or you disappear into that shadow. And you're always going to be deemed insufficient because you haven't lived up to the example of the one that came before you. When you look at Yusuf alayhi salam is not a disappointment. In fact, out of all of the children of Yaqub alayhi salam, Yusuf alayhi salam is the one who clearly is destined for greatness. He's clearly the chosen child. He's clearly the one that's going to carry the torch and that's going to gather all of what has come before him. And when Zakaria alayhi salam made dua for a child, he said, يَرِثُنِي وَيَرِثُ مِنْ آلِ يَعْقُوبَ وَاجْعَلْهُ رَبِّي رَضِيًّا. Let my son inherit me and inherit from the family of Yaqub and make him to you, O my Lord, pleasing. The idea was that if you give me a son, O Allah, you give me a child, I don't just want him to have my greatness or what I have attained. I actually want him to be able to gather a greater spectrum of knowledge and piety, the legacy of the prophets that came before me as well. I want him to have the wisdom of Bani Israel. I want him to have knowledge of all of that which came before. When they say the parent wishes that their child would surpass them, and this is not true of any other human relationship, at least at the natural level, there are exceptions to that rule, but the parents are different. This is culminated in the dua of Zakaria for his son Yahya, that I want him not just to gain what I have, but to gain what all of the prophets of Bani Israel have had. And Yahya alayhi salam did not disappoint. He had the knowledge of the Torah. He was the scholar of all scholars, as far as the prophets were concerned, in terms of the prophets of Bani Israel. So he used Yaqub as a starting point. What then, when Yaqub looks at a son of his, or when he looks at this son of his eye gleams with such love and such promise that the brothers of Yusuf alayhi salam look at him with envy, not because of the unfair treatment of Yaqub, but just because the distinction of greatness was so obvious. Imagine if Yusuf alayhi salam was having an interview as a young man, before he was taken into this trial of his. What do you want to become? How do you see your life playing out? Not only, by the way, are you the son of a prophet, the son of a prophet, the son of a prophet, the father of prophets, Ibrahim alayhi salam, you also are the most beautiful human being we've ever seen. Half of the beauty has been put in Yusuf alayhi salam. Like, imagine what it was like to see him, this kid, and to think about what his life was going to be. And Yusuf had a dream. The way that Yusuf alayhi salam saw that dream playing out, perhaps, was different, or certainly different, to how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was going to plan it out for him. But at the end of the day, if Yusuf was to share that dream with you and you don't know what's going to become of the story of Yusuf alayhi salam, that I saw the sun, the moon, the stars prostrating to me, you would have said, it sounds about right. This is the dream of Yusuf alayhi salam. This is the work of Yusuf alayhi salam. This is the natural bestowal of greatness upon Yusuf alayhi salam. The trajectory seems to match the dream. But look what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala decreed for him. Suddenly he finds himself in a well. Suddenly he finds himself as a slave. Suddenly he finds himself as a slandered slave. Suddenly he finds himself as a prisoner slandered slave. And then all of that switches and he becomes a minister. And not only does he rise towards the greatness that was charted out for him as a natural trajectory, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave him things that he never would have dreamt about, but after trials that he would have never anticipated. Allah gave him so much more. Imagine if Yusuf alayhi salam did not go through all of that. What would his story have been like in the Quran? How fewer would the pages have been? Would he have been mentioned simply as Yaqub is mentioned? Ishaq, who undoubtedly is a great prophet, an answer to a prayer. But do you have the story of Ishaq alayhi salam in the Quran? Would Yusuf alayhi salam have been just that, which is still a lot? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had in store for him to be so much more. His story expanded as a direct result of his trials expanding, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not test without purpose. Therefore, when you recognize that everything that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is putting in front of me, every single obstacle that I am encountering is part of the recipe of my greatness, then you're able to bear the trials with grace. That all of this has the potential to take me from being a few ayats in the metaphorical sense to being an entire chapter. Then you'll bear the trials with grace. You'll bear the things that come your way with grace. It started off with a dream. But it didn't just go from Yusuf having this dream to the sudden celebration, the sudden manifestation of that dream. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala put Yusuf alayhi salam through a nightmare before he actually arrived at that dream. Then the dream made sense. Then the nightmare was put in perspective. Then it all came together. Likewise, our Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Imagine what it was like to be him. At the age of 39 years old, and for 6 months, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam sees dreams about what tomorrow is going to be. He sees exactly what's going to play out the next day, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He can capture it, alayhi salatu wasalam. Like, think about that. Imagine seeing a conversation in a dream and then waking up the next morning and that conversation happens in front of you in the exact same setting. Imagine seeing a dream that someone died and then waking up in the morning to the announcement of that person's death. This was happening to the Prophet ﷺ for 6 months. That is what partly drove him to the cave in Hira, to try to make sense of whatever was communicating with him. And he believed in Allah, he believed in God, However, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was communicating with him what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala destined him for. He went to Ghar Hira sallallahu alayhi wasallam, and the story was being built up for him. The dreams were there, highlighting clear prophecy. The character and the reputation were intact. The positioning was perfect. Khadija radiallahu ta'ala anha is his wife. He is a Hashimi sallallahu alayhi wasallam of the most noble lineage. It all seems to be coming perfectly together. But 2 decades of a nightmare. Not all of it, but some of it. Ta'if, the persecution of the family of Yasir, the loss of his uncle, Abu Talib, the humiliation at the hands of those that were supposed to be closest to him, Hijrah, forced migration, exile, Uhud. There's a lot that had to happen for him to reach what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had destined him for, sallallahu alayhi wasallam. But it started off with true dreams that manifested in something so much more expansive. See, I gave you the example of Yusuf alayhi salam. Had Yusuf not gone through that trial, he might have been a few ayats in the Quran, but now he's a chapter. Had the Prophet ﷺ stood up on Safa after seeing those dreams and being affirmed by Khadija radiallahu ta'ala anha and being affirmed by Jibreel alayhi salam, had he stood up on Safa and they said to him, Anta Sadiq, Anta al-Amin, Amanna, Radina, we believe in you, we are pleased with you, then the story of the Prophet ﷺ, the seerah of the Prophet ﷺ would have been shorter and the gems would have been less. And the position would not have been to the extent that it is now, as Allah always decreed, Ashraful Khalq, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, the most honorable of Allah's creation, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam.